Thank you for tuning in to Matters of the Heart Radio Live with your host, biblical counselor and author, Ms. Wendy. We want to hear from you today. Call into the show at 469-844-5152. You can also chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in your player to send us a message. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Hello and welcome to Matters of the Heart today. I am so excited about today's topic. You know, as a marriage counselor, this is something that's a consistent issue that needs to be addressed within relationships, but not just in marriage relationships. The truth is that we all can benefit from having great communication skills because we're in communication with anyone that we have a relationship with. From the people at the light company to your children, your coworkers, your supervisors, and of course your sweetheart, right? So today I'm going to talk about how we can be great and effective communicators. I hope to help you minimize some of the arguments at home and get better understanding. So listen, I want to encourage you, get a hold of your honey or make sure you jot down how you're listening so you can play this back for them later. But if you can both be listening or if your friends can be listening, I hope that you do and you all tune in so that you can gain some great communication skills together, because it's a lot easier to communicate with someone when they too have made themselves a student of how to be a good communicator. Well, it's a joy to get to be with you wherever you're at today, and I love hearing from you. Thanks for reaching out and let me know what matters are on your heart. As you know, this is a live call-in show, and at the second half, so after 12:30, we will open the phone lines so that I can take any questions that you may have. So if you want to ask a question, know that you can call in then. So, Christine, I'm glad you're here to produce the show for me and do all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Welcome to the show today, too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, communication, kind of give me your thoughts on that, or being a good communicator.
I think especially for women, it's important to be good communicators with how they want to express themselves. It seems like the trend for us is always to be more silent. I think with other women, we're very intuitive to what's going on and how they feel without them necessarily communicating. I don't think that always travels across. Intuition doesn't always pick up what it is that you're wanting the other person to say or react to. And instead, when I think of good communication, I think of maybe stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit and just saying, hey, I really wish you would do this, or hey, that really bothered me, or that's what I think of when I think of good communication is expressing what's on your mind in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Does that sound right to you?
Well, it's your opinion, and that's what I asked for, and that works. So I'm completely convinced that people want to be fully known, fully loved, and fully understood by those that they are in intimate relationship with. All of us want to be known and understood and loved, but we don't want to just be loved for when we're doing good and right, but it really translates and means a lot when we're loved and we've made mistakes or we're not doing something right. That's one of the things that compels us about God's love, and it's that even while we were still sinners, He loved us. And knowing that in my rebellion or in my foolishness, when I wasn't even really mindful of God, He loved me and He knew everything. So it's a pretty powerful thing. And I think especially with our children, being a good communicator is really important. So I'm going to start today with talking about the golden rule for being a good communicator. Now, you and I, Christine, have not talked about this before the show, so everything's kind of raw and off the cuff. So I'm just going to pick on you.
Okay.
because I can. So if you had a guess as to what the golden rule for being a good communicator is, what would it be?
Speak to others the way you would like to be spoken to.
That sounds like the golden rule, but do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. Sure. But no, not for communicating.
All right.
Okay. The golden rule for being a good communicator is you're not ready to talk until you're ready to listen. Uh-oh. Is listening fun sometimes?
No.
But it really does save a lot of time and a lot of trouble. And the truth is you are really not ready to talk until you're ready to listen. Why? Because if all you want to do is talk, and not listen, it's going to be a one-sided conversation, and it's going to fall apart and it's going to crumble. So again, the golden rule is you're not ready to talk until you're ready to listen.
I'm ready to talk, or I'm ready to listen after I talk.
Okay, let's go over it again. You're not ready to talk until you're ready to listen. And, communication implies that it's more than one person talking. If it's just us talking to ourselves, that's one thing. But when we're actually having a dialogue with someone else, that's different. And they matter. We're not the only ones. So it's kind of a selfless approach. But do you know that selflessness is very healthy? Now, I'm not talking about putting your head in the sand and you don't matter and ignoring troubles. No, not by any measure at all. But what I mean is, in the time that we live in my opinion, we can become very egocentrical, and it's all about me and what I think and what I have to say. And truly, that's not the healthiest recipe for intimate relationships.
Oh, indeed. I think that it sounds like there's what you're saying is that there's a lot of that going on even out. It primarily comes from and through communication, that self-centered attitude, and being able to stop and evaluate what needs the other person has is probably sounds like that's a pretty strong requirement to effective communication.
Right. And the truth is that you and I are not really going to have a good relationship if we cannot communicate well. Because what does it take to hold the relationship together? Yes, love is nice, but if you can't communicate that love, if you can't communicate vulnerability and understanding, you're not going to have that relationship.
Well, it sounds like a really good word that you used just a second ago was dialogue. And I think that's probably a pretty important word to remember when you're discussing stuff with people and trying to resolve issues.
Right. So you're not ready to talk until you're ready to listen. Let's move on. So I'm going to give a hypothetical situation as we go through the show today, and I'm just going to kind of give you some points and things to think about so that you can communicate effectively in the relationships that you're involved in, and especially for those that mean the most to you, that I know you want to guard and invest in. This is your investment. The more we learn, the more understanding we gain, the better. The Word of God is so full of encouragement, telling us to gain understanding. And it is important that when we're talking, that we have that agenda in mind, that we want to understand. But let's start at the beginning and let's lay a foundation for being a great communicator. Okay, so I want to tell you that a great communicator uses whole body language. Your body communicates. Your body language communicates. If you're listening or not really listening, if you have your nose buried in your phone while your honey is trying to talk to you, do you really think you're communicating to them by your body language that you're interested or that you care about what they're saying?
You
no.
mean that eye roll that I gave when you said something I didn't like wasn't a good thing?
Yeah, that too. Eye contact is key. I'm going to get to that. But, sitting in the chair, holding the remote, flipping the channels when someone's trying to talk to you, whether it's your spouse or your children or a friend, whatever it may be, and paying more attention to the TV or the computer or your phone rather than pausing or stopping or setting it down to even just look at them is key, because your body communicates whether or not you're listening. If you're listening with your arms folded and that is generally a sign of stubbornness, and I am not open to communicating with you. Hands down is usually a good sign when you're just reading body language. When clients come into the office, that's one of the first things I look at long before they ever say a word. Are they sitting on the same couch? Are they sitting on different couches? Are they sitting side by side? It really tells a lot. And when you are hoping to have a conversation with someone, or you're in an intimate relationship with someone, it's imperative that you are mindful that you are communicating with your body, that they're listening. Truly, how many very, very, very important people do we have in our life?
Yeah, lots of people. We have family, we have friends, we have acquaintances, spouses, children. There's a whole litany of people that are really important to you, and it seems like you're effectively communicating with them when you put down the distractions and give them your full attention, not only with your words, but with your body.
Sure. And we have different spheres of influence. I'm probably not going to give the same attention to the lady in the grocery store that I would my sweetheart sitting on the couch, right? Because we've separated how important someone feels to us. So am I really going to give the lady at the supermarket all of my undivided time and attention? Well, no, because I don't know her that well. I may be courteous and kind, but that's different than trying to communicate with someone that you really care about and having a conversation. So I want you to know that if you are on Facebook and your honey is trying to talk to you, that in essence, what you're saying is Facebook is more important than you are. Whoop. Mic drop. If you are flipping the channels while they're trying to talk to you, do you know what you're saying? You're saying the TV is more important than you are. Now, some of you may argue and say, no, I'm not really saying that, but actually you are with your body language. If you are more concentrated on looking at other people's lives on Facebook or tweeting something or doing something with your phone, you are communicating that message, whether you mean to or not. So let's wise up and realize that that really is what we are saying when we do that. And I cannot express, especially when it comes to children, how important it is to set your phone down when they walk in a room if possible. You know, you can go to a restaurant, and I can go to a restaurant and see the entire family on their phone and no one's even talking to each other. And then we wonder, why are my kids so disconnected from you? Why is my spouse, my girlfriend, whomever so disconnected from me? Well, that's a pretty big reason why, because you're putting your focus on your attention into your phone, not really the person that you say you care about that is right in front of your face.
What is the term avoidance in all of that mean to you? Does avoidance of maybe especially difficult topic of conversation, when, say, your spouse is trying to talk to you about something and maybe that's not a conversation you want to have at that moment, and so avoidance comes through actions like flipping through the TV or scrolling through Facebook? Does that seem like that factors in?
It can. That's not really the perspective that I was taking on it, but you're definitely right. But really, are you avoiding a fight, or are you avoiding a topic that needs to be discussed? I mean, there has to be an element of maturity where we say, okay, I don't really want to go here right now because I'm not really ready to listen. And I have to put this guard up for myself. Otherwise, I may speak foolishly, ignorantly, and out of raw emotion, and I'm going to probably damage the relationship somehow, not help it. And then there's a difference between I'm sick and tired of talking about the relationship or what you're wanting. You want to go dancing. I'm tired of hearing you ask, so I'm just going to avoid it altogether. That's completely different. It's really a matter of the heart and where you're coming from. Are you avoiding it because you just don't want to talk about it because you don't want to bend or go there and your motive is not really so good? Or are you avoiding it because you're not really ready or in a good place to handle it?
So if you're talking on the other level of that, where you see the whole families out at the restaurant at the table and all of them all on their phone, do you think that comes from just the societal saturation of distraction, of constantly being distracted, and it's actually put communication and connection with other people kind of on the back burner because there's always something to be distracted about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it gives a false sense of intimacy. And now I love Facebook. I'm on Facebook every day. I do it for the show. I do it in my life. But how many of my Facebook friends are going to show up at the hospital and spoon feed me if I can't feed myself? We have to realistically be able to differentiate between the levels of friendship that we have with people. And it's great to say, I love my kids and post a picture of my kids, but when your kids are in your presence, they're not your priority. I think we have to be really careful with that because, and I don't want to get too derailed on the Facebook thing, but I have a number of people who come into the office because Facebook really takes them to a depressed state because they keep seeing images of happy families, no problems, lots of smiles, and a lot of times that's a facade. And I even have clients who will say, I put this out there because I want people to believe it, but it's so far from the truth. Now, back to the topic, it's important that you focus on who you're talking to and that you communicate with your body, that you're paying attention, and that the person that you're talking to matters. Now, let's take a quick commercial break and I'll move on to the next point.
Are you suffering from a past hurt? Lingering pains can inhibit your potential to be all that God has in store for you in your life. As a biblical counselor, Miss Wendy has written Healing Waters, a 21-day workbook which offers well-thought-out steps to emotional recovery. Making use of hands-on activities, prayers, and meditation on Scripture, Miss Wendy helps build faith and develop patterns that establish lifelong vitality. Why not take that step to the healthy, whole, God-filled individual you're meant to be? Go to mattersoftheheartradio.org to order your copy today. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org.
We want to hear from you today. Call into the show at 469-844-5152. You can also chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in your player to send us a message. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Well, if you're just tuning in, I want you to know that I'm glad to have you. You have a front row seat, or actually not front row seat. You have a seat here at my table as I sit and do the show and have some coffee. Christine's drinking water, and I am excited to encourage you in being a great communicator. I was talking earlier about using whole body language to communicate that you're interested and that you care about the other person. Truly, sometimes words are cheap and actions speak louder than words. So you want your actions to back up all of your I love you, honeys, I'll do anything, all of that kind of good stuff. And I want to encourage you to set a standard, set an expectation. At my house, there are absolutely no phones allowed at the dinner table. It's just not going to happen. We're here to visit with each other, not Snapchat and all of these other great things as we have dinner, and dinners at my house can last a while. But now it's understood. At the very beginning, there was a little resistance when I set that rule down, but now it's just normal, and we don't even think about bringing the phone to the table. And also, let me say, timing is everything. Choosing to talk to your honey right before you go to sleep, just after you climb into bed, when one or the other is absolutely exhausted, is not good timing. There is no wisdom in that. Picking a fight by trying to stand in front of the TV when their typical favorite show comes on so that you can be heard, that's not good timing. You're not really exercising wisdom there. Let's make sure that our hearts have the right motives when we're seeking to bring resolution to a difficulty that we're encountering with someone. Own your part of the relationship and being a good communicator. It is not the responsibility of just one person to carry the entire load for being a good communicator in the relationship. Own your part and let the other person own their part, okay? If you want to use these tools in communicating with a spouse or a friend, someone that you would kind of consider your equal, then try hard not to talk down to them as if you were their parent. This is something I see all of the time. You will listen to me. I told you type stuff in the office. And I want to encourage you, if it's someone that is your equal, ask, don't tell. There's a huge difference in making a request to please put your phone down. Would you please put it down so we can talk? And I told you to put your phone down. Does that make a sense to you, Christine?
It does make sense to me. It's more of a request than a demand. It sounds like your phrasing is everything.
And it's respectful. Sometimes respect goes so far out the window, and we give the people that we love the most the least amount of respect. That's backwards. That's not right. If we're telling them, I love you enough to share my life with you, to be married with you, children, finances, office space, whatever it is, then let's make sure we're consistently conveying that message. And that includes how we talk to them, not talking down to them like we're their parent, but talking to them like we're equals.
I think one of my favorite phrases that you bring up, that you even utilized in our relationship, was the taking offense at something that you may have misheard in communication.
I'm going there. Yeah. I am definitely, that's where I'm headed. Oh, now don't get ahead of me now. You're giving away all my secrets too fast. All right. But yes, you're right. We're going to get to that. So I'm talking about listening and what it is to be a good listener. Use whole body language. Make eye contact. Speak to the person, not just at them or not at them. Make sure you give them the respect and that your actions back up your words, okay? Only one person should talk at a time. If one person is talking, it allows the other person to listen. If both people are talking, it probably is going to turn into yelling. And the truth is that both want to be understood, but neither will be heard. So it's important for only one person to talk at a time. If one person is trying to get a sentence out and every 2 or 3 words, you're jumping in saying, wait, but no, hold on, no, and they can't even get through a sentence, you are not being an effective communicator because you're not listening. Remember, you're not ready to listen. You're not ready to talk until you're ready to listen. Use whole body language. Use respect. Use eye contact. And don't talk while the other person is talking, because then it can kind of turn into a shouting match and it's one person trying to overtalk the other to try to prove their point. And all they're doing is getting more caught up in the negative emotion. And before you know it, you have thrown an entire gallon of gasoline on a fire and you are not making headway on whatever it is that you're wanting to discuss.
I think that's difficult for me, and if the other person has a lot that they want to say and they're on point 2 of 5 and I have a really good retort for point 2 and waiting until point 5 is finished, it's kind of hard to remember what I was going to say to point 2. So it's easy for me to want to interrupt somebody when they're in the middle of expressing themselves and just saying, wait, no, but. So I think it's hard to remember to be mindful of other people's, time to communicate to you.
Right. Well, and then I would question, are you listening to understand in order to solve the problem, or are you listening so that they hear what you have to say and you're going to fight about it? There's really no good way to have a conversation when you're just fighting to fight. And sometimes, and some people are like that. I'm going to fight just to fight. I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to one up you. And you know what? You break and you damage your relationship that way because the other person wants to be understood. Seeking to understand them really is a game changer. Seeking to understand them. I know none of us like to feel criticized or have someone critique something that we're doing or to be told that we're doing something wrong. But you know what? If it's an intimate relationship of yours, the truth is you probably need to hear it, or at least have the opportunity to know that you're doing something that is offensive or hurtful, and the opportunity to correct it. Because if it's never brought to your attention, how will you ever be able to fix it? I can forget things that I may want to say, and sometimes I'll just say, okay, hold on, let me grab a piece of paper, because I don't want to cut you off, but I don't want to forget what I'm going to say. There's a lot of meaning in that for me, because it is easy for me to forget maybe what they started out by saying. Or we can say, let's take it one point at a time. Or can I respond to that? That is a better way than looking to hurry up and argue why they're wrong about what they pointed about your behavior or shortcoming or anything like that. So now on to what you were saying earlier, filters. I think we all have filters. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're at. We all tend to have a set of filters that cover our ears, in my opinion. And the filters come from our experience in life. And they can come in at different times and different stages in life. If as a child you never felt respected, or valued, or secure, or loved, or wanted, then you are probably going to argue from that stance, because you want to feel respected, you want to feel valued, you want to feel secure, and you want your significant other to fix that pain from your past. So it's important to really look at what filters you may be wearing. This is where arguments tend to change. Sometimes you can go into a conversation and one person may say, it really would help me out if you would take the trash out. Or, I asked you to take out the trash. Was there a reason why you couldn't get it done this morning? Someone may say that, and the person on the receiving end may hear, you are so lazy. I am sick of you not taking out the trash. But the first person never said that. Why did they hear that? They heard it because of the filters that they have on their ears. If they grew up with a critical parent, the person that they're married to may not be critical at all. But they tend to hear things through a critical lens. And if there was someone that maybe has a problem with feeling valued or important, they may be somewhat defiant because they feel like that's such a meaningful job and you're giving it to me because, you think so lowly of me? It could be anything. That's kind of a little far-fetched, but things like that do happen. And then you begin to argue about something that has never been said, but then you begin to argue from that point of view where you're hurt or offended. So instead of arguing, or instead of saying, well, I was running late this morning, I'm sorry, honey, I didn't get a chance to get around to it, you begin to argue from what you heard or how you were offended or what you assumed in their statement, and begin to point out, oh yeah, well, I asked you to make up the bed and you didn't make up the bed. And whoop, now we've taken a turn in the conversation. We're no longer talking about the trash. Now we're going to begin fault finding, and that fault finding can turn into a huge disaster when the intent of the conversation was what happened with the trash this morning.
Sounds like you're saying defensive communication ends up being a distraction to what the true topic was about. It ends up being a blow up when it doesn't necessarily have to be, but you're in defensive communication mode, and suddenly it becomes a fight about something completely different, or a conversation about something completely different.
Well, sure. So we can begin to argue from what we think we heard the other person say. So if I feel like you're saying, I just don't give you enough and I'm giving you all that I can, then it makes me want to argue and say, there is nothing else I can give you. But if in reality you're not saying that at all, and you're just saying, I only miss you and long to see you more, well, that's entirely different. So the best way to minimize that is to ask a clarifying question. And here is the crux of being a good communicator, aside from being a good listener. Ask the other person, what did you hear me say? Or, so what I hear you saying is. So what I hear you saying is that I'm lazy and I disappoint you all of the time because I don't take the trash out and get carried away and go down that path. No, I'm not saying that at all. Actually, what I'm thinking is you're usually really good at doing that, and it kind of surprised me that it didn't happen this morning, and I was just wondering what happened. Oh, but if the person who was offended, and as they were listening through that filter, hears something different, their perspective is very, very tainted in contrast to what the original statement was concerning them, or question. So then ask, so what I hear you saying is. Now this takes a relationship to an entirely different level of vulnerability, because most of the time people spend time trying to cover up what they're really hearing, because it's a pretty vulnerable stance. So rather than saying, well, I feel like you're saying that I'm lazy, because we don't even want to utter those words, but that is what we really are hearing. Instead of saying that, we cover it up and we deflect and we put it back on them. And that does not help the relationship at all. So if you can go back and ask a simple clarifying question, such as, so what I hear you saying is, wow. You would be shocked. I've seen at least 90% of arguments dissipate just from getting a better understanding as to what is being said and what is being heard.
So instead of taking that comment that was made to me, filtering it through all my little distorted filters, and then throwing it back to somebody else, the person that said it, with this exclamation point on the end of it, sounds like the tool to use instead of that accusatory remark back is, wait a minute, what I hear you saying is this, and it allows the opportunity for you to show your vulnerability in where you're hurt, express your vulnerability and your hurt, and give that person the opportunity to diffuse what could potentially be a big bomb right there in your relationship.
Right. And so when we ask in order to clarify what it is that we've heard, it does take a certain amount of vulnerability. And vulnerability is something that many of us shy away from because maybe we've learned somewhere that being vulnerable is not a safe place to be. And in fact, it is actually a powerful place to be when you ask these clarifying questions, such as, so what I hear you saying is, or something doesn't seem right. Can you tell me what you heard me say? Because then you allow the other person to let you into their mind, into their heart, into their world, and you can clarify what is really going on. And when you do that, you're going to find that the arguments don't really get out of control like they did before. And you're even able oftentimes to bring some healing, to say, oh no, honey, I'm so sorry. That's not what I meant to do at all. Maybe I need to rephrase that and try again, or let me try that again because that is absolutely not what I meant. And wow, there's some healing that comes in. And then you validate just how significant the other person is to you. And you can also see how and or why it's important that you're not distracted with your phone or TV or all of these other good things in the midst of having a serious conversation just like this. If your mind is put on those distractions, it is not on yourself and really trying to understand what's happening even within yourself in the context of a difficult conversation.
It sounds like it ties into what you were talking about earlier, and growing up or having these experiences that caused you to put filters on in your communication, but then having that person that's so close to you, like a spouse or a partner, where you've agreed or you've entered into this relationship with them. And it sounds like trust is a big part of that. If you trusted them enough to get married, do you trust them enough with your vulnerable hurts to communicate it?
And for those that are dating or engaged, listen, you want a good test as to whether or not you should really be with this person. How vulnerable can you be with them whenever you're having an argument or you don't see things eye to eye? Are you honestly able to share that you don't feel respected, or you don't feel understood, or you don't feel valued, you don't feel loved? That's going to tell you a lot, because if they can't handle it well, or you don't feel safe enough to tell them, you're probably not in the best relationship for yourself. So yeah, that one was a freebie extra. Okay. Because we've experienced or heard messages that were difficult in the past, maybe you grew up in a large family and you were overlooked a lot, it can also taint how you express yourself when you do not feel heard or understood. You may become a yeller because that's how you learned to get attention when you were younger. That in order to get people's attention, you would have to yell at home. And so when something is meaningful or significant to you, you may be someone who yells a lot to try to get your point across. And the truth is that you can communicate just as effectively without raising your voice if you will practice using your voice more. I know that that can be a stretch for some, but that's why I said at the very beginning of the conversation, you have to own your part of being a great communicator. You have your part that you're responsible for, and the other person that you're with has their part that they're responsible for. And the more that you emulate this in your life as a lifestyle, especially with your children, the better communicators they will become, and you will be surprised surprised at just how well you can communicate with them as they gain these skills to use as they communicate with you and continue to get older and all of these good kind of things. And there's no such thing as being too young to practice this with your babies. You can practice with their 2 or 3-year-old when they're crying and they're saying, somebody took my toy, and they're just pitching a fit, and trying to get them to express what's wrong and to talk will really help them. So a little girl could be crying and she's mad because her brother took her toy, and she's just screaming and crying, and you can't get her to say 2 words. And you can go to her and ask her, honey, what's wrong? And help her to gain her composure as best as possible, comforting her with touch, and just say, tell me what's wrong. They took my toy. Okay, so what I hear you saying is that you're mad. Oh, yes, I'm mad. Well, let's fix it. Let's go back and get the toy. You change things for them because as they continue to get older, you've helped them identify already what's happening on the inside, and they can communicate it with you much more effectively. Listen, this goes great with workers, co-workers, employees, and employers. So what I hear you saying is the quality of my work is not good enough or satisfactory enough to warrant a raise. Well, and you can just take it from there. But you cannot go wrong in using this method or this style of communication. And then when you're sharing what you heard the other person say, here's the other real big in highlighted yellow marker. Speak in I statements. I feel misunderstood. I feel devalued. I feel, rather than you make me feel stupid. You, because you accuse the other person then. And when you're accusing them, they're ready to come out with their dukes on. They're ready to fight and defend themselves. But if you speak from an I statement, they're able to keep their guard down and actually hear what you're saying compared to spending their energy and time fighting to protect themselves from a sense of being attacked. So if you want to have a smoother flow, realize that if you speak in I statements, the other person really just hears it as an invitation to get in the arena and duke it out, because no one likes to be accused. And if they have been misunderstood, then they're really going to be ready to fight from, there you go again, putting it on me. When are you going to understand that it's not all me? When will you see that you've been hurt for a really long time from other people who've betrayed you, and you're making me pay for their mistakes?
Ooh, that's asking me to be really vulnerable.
I told you. Hey, but listen, you want deep, you want intimate, you want understanding, and you want longevity in your relationships. This is where it's at.
Well, that makes sense. It's, again, I think going back to that idea of trusting the person that you've chosen to spend your life with, and to be able to give yourself that opportunity to put them in a place of, I don't know the right counselor word for that, but just giving them that trust and trusting them. You've given your life to them and putting them in that place where you can trust them with your vulnerable feelings and say, look, this is a really vulnerable place for me, but that hurts, or that annoys me, or you're telling me it's I guess hearkening back to maybe old hurts, to say, you've hurt me, and that really hurts me when I hear you say that. This is what it brings up for me. And that's a lot of vulnerable to be.
Yeah. And again, I would refrain from the you statements. I would say, I'm feeling misunderstood right now, or I feel really hurt. I feel seriously disrespected with that comment. Because if you keep saying their gloves are laced up really tight and they're going to go for an uppercut or something, and the fight is on, and you can find that the argument lasts for hours, sometimes days, weeks, months. And the truth is even years, and it's prolonged because no one's really willing to get down to the core issues. And giving benefit of the doubt is huge, 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 huge. Let's go to a commercial break and I'll wrap it up.
Matters of the Heart radio show is a part of the only Christian radio station in Pakistan. Miss Wendy has the opportunity to share the gospel message there, and you have the opportunity to help. For a donation of any amount, you can help her to continue to bring this ministry to the people of Pakistan. For a donation of only $6, they will receive a Bible in their own native language of Urdu. Simply go to mattersoftheheartradio.org and click on the donate button today. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org.
We want to hear from you today. Call into the show at 469-844-5152. You can also chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in your player to send us a message. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Yes, I have a few minutes left. If you would like to call in and give me an example or ask a question, I would be happy to answer that. Dial 469-844-5152. That's 469-844-5152. And if I get a chance here, I'm going to pick up the line and listen to what you have to say and answer your question. So once we've moved to this and we are working through understanding the other person, we're going to find that things begin to settle down because you love the other person and you both really do want to get along. Very few people go into marriage wanting to be divorced. Very few people want to be separated from their family, friends, loved ones. If they matter to you, then you want them around. And as you're using these communication tools, you're going to find that the misunderstandings begin to become fewer and fewer. And that's key. From there, we can move to learning how to validate the other person. Sometimes the truth is we don't say things just right. And it's okay to say, I can see how you would interpret that because I did not come across well with that at all. I'm sorry. I was wrong when I did that. You are valuable to me. Your opinion does matter to me. I do respect you. And being able to make a request. So can you just let me know if you need help in the morning and you're running late and you can't take out the trash? I'm using that as a really simple example. I know that things can be much more complicated, but validating the other person's needs, validating the other person's feelings is essential because no one goes into a relationship to feel alone. And if you can't validate how they feel, you're probably going to lose them because people want to know that they matter. And if they have a sense that they don't, they usually become vulnerable prey to those that will show them that they do. And hence I see a lot of affairs and stuff like that coming in. And it's really unfortunate because it can be avoided just by gaining tools and being a better communicator, validating how someone else feels. And, if you've hurt them with your words.
I'm just smiling because I might have a little bit of a curveball in my question to you. And maybe I'm kind of far off of it here, but you use words about being vulnerable and things like that, and the way that communicating to other people effectively. my first thought jumps to men, and they're taught to communicate much differently than women are, whereas women just more openly express their emotions, their feelings, what they think about things. And I don't think men are necessarily cultivated that way to speak that way. So the idea of vulnerability, quote unquote, or sharing and things like that, it's the word that I think culturally calls to mind is emasculating or unempowering. And how does that translate for people, not just men, but people that don't necessarily feel like that's something that empowers me, or that's something that empowers our relationship, when the contrary is actually true? It does, but that's just not what you've been brought up to think. Or
Right. That's a fantastic question. You know, there are a lot of misconceptions, and I think sometimes men take a bad rap on this, because the truth is that they do have feelings, but they grow up in an environment which stifles that or teaches them to suppress it, so that they don't, A, pay attention to what they're really feeling, and B, definitely don't communicate it. I believe that it is a gift. All of our emotions are a gift from God. And I know that the Father in heaven, God, has emotions. We read in the Bible about God being angry or having compassion and such things. And we know that Jesus did too. We know that he wept. He was a man. And there is something to be said about helping to bring that out of your husband, out of your son, if you see that that is something that is difficult for them. Men do know how to be vulnerable. For them, it's really more of a matter of feeling secure, and that you're not then going to, as a woman, in context of what you're saying, Christine, you're not going to turn around and use it against them. That is usually where I find the crux of the problem at. Why don't they want to? Because they don't want you to view them as weak. They do not want you to play on their emotions. They want to be safe. They still want to be respected, and they need to feel valued. All men have a vulnerable side, and you will see it in different times, in different ways. They show you at different times in different ways, but no one is exempt from being hurt, being misunderstood, and not being in a relationship where they need good communication skills. And in a marriage, I would say that phrase is pretty fitting right now. Happy wife, happy life. Why? Because it's true. If someone is unhappy, even the dad, even the father or the man, you're not going to find harmony and peace in the home, and a house divided will not stand. Don't be afraid is what I would say for men. Don't be afraid. Grow yourself. You don't want to lose her. You don't want to lose your family. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself or to grow in it, or re-listen to this broadcast many times, so that you are accepting responsibility for yourself, not shrugging it off for what's popular, what's cool, or what you think is acceptable, but embracing what works, so that you don't sabotage yourself in the name of pride and lose what means the most to you.
Good answer.
Yeah, thanks. So listen, Christine, Matters of the Heart has multiple facets to it. This is one, the 1 hour show. But we also have a half-hour show that airs, I think, 7 days a week right now. And I love airing on international stations. And we have a new phase to the half-hour show that is being created just for children, and in particular, children of Pakistan and Africa, where the gospel is not readily available. And in Pakistan, I am on the only Christian radio station there, and one of 2 female voices lent to those who are listening. And you know that I hear from listeners all of the time as they talk about how the God that I teach about, because the show is different, it's a different kind of platform, it's a lot of teaching, how the God that I teach teach and talk about is different from all of the Bible. And I talk about salvation and such. And I have just been inspired and encouraged and spurred on in radio work to continue to teach the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it is good news. And we've begun a children's edition to Matters of the Heart for children. Play that little clip for me so our people listening to this show can hear what we're doing, would you? Okay, so they go to Bethlehem, and do you know that it was loud there and it was busy? And there was a lot of hustle and bustle because everyone had to go to where their family came from, their ancestry came from. So there were many who were traveling to Bethlehem as well. Well, there were so many in Bethlehem that they could not find a place to stay. And they were knocking, looking, seeking. Joseph was, where can I take Mary? She's about to have her baby. She is in a lot of pain. Where can I take Mary? And there was no room for them anywhere. I love it. You know, laying down those fundamental teachings, such as this one, that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, is huge, because these are not things that people there are accustomed to hearing. And I want to take the gospel there, and I need partners who can help me fund getting the gospel and bringing life to the nations of the world. Would you consider partnering with me? That's what I'm asking for. Would you consider partnering with me to help keep the show on the air there, as well as here as you're listening to this show? No one pays me anything for doing this show. As a matter of fact, I always pay to do it. So I'm paying to be of service to you. Would you join me? Would you help join in the eternal work and reward of reaching to the nations with the gospel and ministering to the children there as they gather around? The children who are listening are hungry, and they deal with life on such a different level than the American children typically do, where ISIS is around so many corners, where Christians are persecuted. They're losing their parents and siblings and friends because they become Christians or because they have a Bible. They love Jesus, and it's important that they have hope, as so many children are shot in playgrounds there as they just go to play, or walking down the street, or Christian villages are persecuted or caught on fire. Please help me. Help me keep the word. Help me keep the gospel on the air in this place. For truly none of us know when the appointed time will come when we meet our Maker face to face. But let us be not lukewarm, but hot and on fire for sharing the gospel and getting the good news to as many people as we possibly can, and investing our money well into kingdom work.
I think it's really a wonderful opportunity to reach out. This is what I would think of as adverse ground for sowing seeds because of the hostile environment of some of these places. And the thing about reaching out with the gospel to these really harsh in these really harsh conditions and this really harsh adverse ground is that when you do sow those seeds, they take strong roots, and those strong roots stay. They're not easily pulled up. They're not easily drowned out. They're not easily choked out by weeds and thorns. They are really, really strong, and that opportunity to help that seed be sown in those places is such a privilege, and it's such a gift.
Right. So go to mattersoftheheartradio.org. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org, and join me. And as you join me, I will send you email updates from the kids as we get ready to roll out this new product line here in the next few weeks. And I'm excited to spend time talking with you about how you can be a better communicator, how you can enjoy intimacy and closeness in your most meaningful relationship relationships in life. Remember to visit me at mattersoftheheartradio.org. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org. And let me know where you're listening from, and let me know what matters are on your heart, and help me reach the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
You've been listening to Matters of the Heart Radio Live. If you enjoyed listening to the show today, we ask that you support it with your gifts. The show could not be made possible without generous contributions from our community of faithful listeners, and in order to make it possible to remain on the air, we need your help. The show is made possible for you and with you, so please consider making a donation today. Please visit the show's website, mattersoftheheartradio.org, and click the donation button at the bottom of the homepage. Learn about partnership opportunities and corporate sponsorship with us to order a signed copy of Miss Wendy's book, Healing Waters. To schedule a counseling session with Ms. Wendy, go to refreshingtimescounselingcenter.com. Visit us on Facebook, and please don't forget to tune in next week with Ms. Wendy on Matters of the Heart Radio Live.